1 minute. I'd like to begin today's meeting by thanking the Chair of the City Planning for allowing us to interrupt his meeting this morning. We do have a deputation from Transport and Main Roads, so thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to begin today's meeting by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we are gathered and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Welcome to the City Infrastructure Committee meeting of 5th October. I declare this meeting open at 9:57 a.m. I'd like to advise attendees in the room that this meeting is being webcasted and audio recorded. I now remind attendees to practice social distancing and take the necessary safety precautions. Welcome, Director.
Thank you.
Due to the Queensland Government's current COVID-19 restrictions, this week of committee meetings will not have physical public gallery. The health, safety and wellbeing of Logan's staff and community is Council's top priority. As such, I'd like to mention an additional special welcome to the 6 members of our community watching today's meeting via live stream. I'd also like to advise attendees in the room that this meeting is being webcasted and audio recorded, and I remind attendees to practice social distancing and take the necessary safety precautions. Today's meeting is interrupting the city planning. As I said, it will only be this particular part of the city infrastructure that will be interrupting the planning. As soon as this delegation is finished, we'll go back to the city planning committees as per usual. As today's agenda does contain a confidential report, I note that a proposed motion to suspend section 7.11 of the Local Government Act and Committee Meeting Code for the purposes of audio recording the closed sessions in today's meeting for Council's internal confidential use only is now displaying on the screen behind me. Is there a mover for this motion? Councillor Wilcox, seconded Councillor Raven. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you very much. Now we've got one leave of absence recorded. That's Councillor Bannon. There being no other. Councillor Karansky, you move. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Fraser. All those in favour, please raise your hands. That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. So item 4.1 is a confidential deputation on the Logan and Gold Coast Faster Rail project. I'll now refer to reports on today's agenda. Please note that whilst the deputation report itself is not confidential, it has been identified that discussions and presentation by the Department of Transport and Main Roads has been deemed confidential. Can the Road and Infrastructure Planning Manager, Mr. Kamal Ranawira, please enter the discussions? And before we open this discussion, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? There being none, thank you. I note that item 4.1 contains confidential presentation. It is considered necessary to take the discussion of this report into a closed session as it relates to the planning information of the state, which has not been released to the public domain. Do any councillors wish to move into a closed session for this item, and if applicable, provide an overview of your intended discussions if it's different to the prepared motion? I now open the floor to councillors. Do I have a mover to move into confidential? Councillor Murphy. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Raven. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Thank you very much. That's unopposed. Councillor Bradley, you were up? Yep. Thank you so much. The closed motion is now displayed on the screen. The motion is carried. The meeting is now closed to the public. Please be advised that the meeting is now in confidential session and therefore the recording of this meeting will be suspended until it reopens. Can you confirm that the recording has been suspended? confidential and we're live? Okay. We've just had a great briefing from Transport and Main Roads. We'd like to thank you all for that briefing. We had a lot of questions to ask, and obviously everything out of that briefing is confidential. We understand that. Moving forward, there's community consultations. Do you have any dates for the next consultations in Logan?
I don't have them in front of me. However, if you do go onto the Transport and Main Roads Logan Gold Coast Fast Rail website, they are all listed there on the Have Your Say component. So all upcoming dates are listed there, including station pop-ups, as well as sessions and drop-ins. We're in the process of scheduling a second one for Woodridge as well, and that date will be added to the website as soon as it's available.
Thank you very much. There's a motion on the screen, and I'd like councillors to read it. I don't need to read it out loud, do I? That's great. Can I have a mover for the motion when you're ready? Councillor Raven, seconded Councillor Murphy. All those in favour, please raise your hands. That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Do we have another motion? So there's another motion on the screen. I'll just give you a moment to read it, given that we've got 2 minutes left of this meeting. Do I have a mover for the motion? Councillor Murphy, seconded Councillor Hall. All those in favour, please raise your hands. I note that Councillor Heremiah and Councillor Wilcox have not raised their hands. Councillor Heremiah?
Abstain.
Councillor Wilcox?
Abstain as well.
You got that? Okay, thanks very much. So we'll now move to suspend the city infrastructure to the completion of city planning. Can I please have a move for that motion? Councillor Raven, seconder. Councillor Fraser, all those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for your time today. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you for having us.
Welcome back to the City Infrastructure Committee meeting. All the previous rules apply. We currently do not have Mr Mayor nor Councillor Kransky, but they are not apologies. They are out attending to other business because we went over time. So do we need to move the reopening? So we'll move that in accordance with section 261 of the Local Government Regulation 2012, that the meeting be recommenced at 2:16 p.m. Tuesday the 5th of October. Can I have a mover for that? That's Councillor Fraser, seconded Councillor Hall. All those in favour, please raise your hands. That's everybody. Thank you very much. So moving on to item 4.2. I now refer to item 4.2. Before we open discussion on this item, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? There being none, I now refer to Mr Ranawira to open public discussion. Mr Ranawira, you may proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, and good afternoon, councillors. This is about permanent road closure, Believer Road, part of Believer Road. Believer, sorry. Yeah, I'll try to get the pronunciation in the Google, but I guess Believer.
Tomato, it's all good. Proceed, Mr Ranawira.
Department of Natural Resources has received an application for the closure, and they are seeking council's endorsement for that. That's the reason report is here. Believer Road is a cul-de-sac road. Is taking off from Bodessa-Beanley Road at the junction of Bannockburn Road. The location and the road closure details are shown in the attachment. And you can see the in shaded area where that is the road that is going to be closed, proposed to be closed. From our internal engagement, we have not received any objections to the closure, provided it is done in a way to provide adequate entry to point to the Believer Hill Park. There's a park next to the road. So the entrance need to be secured. If that can be met, there is no objection. So that's how the recommendation is made. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Heremiah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is not about the outcomes of this report, but it's rather about the contents of the report and some of the internal contents that are under a specific section. So on page 1 of the report, there's the interested parties section. And this is a really important section because, as in my experience, it allows me, before I fully read through the report, it allows me to understand who the interested stakeholders are. It allows me to understand if there's any conflicts of interest or anything like that. Now, what I would really appreciate as a councillor in my personal view is to understand, instead of just having an interested party of adjacent property owners, understanding that in a bit more detail so I can practice my due diligence. So an example could be doing a title search on some adjacent property owners and including that so I understand who could gain a benefit from this report, and that means that I can fully understand the ins and outs of it, and it allows me to vote with confidence. So I wanted to ask Mr. Riley, the director, if it's possible for him to consider the feasibility of including some more detailed information in the interested parties section of future reports.
Director?
Through you, Madam Chair. Certainly in regards to the report, we can look to flesh out those parties which are interested parties. The one that I'm probably cautious of is where we're talking about the general public in regards to just being being adjoining owners and us actually naming them in council reports without their consent or knowledge that we're actually doing that. That would be my, I guess, concern in that regard. But certainly being able to maybe better define those properties which are relevant to the report in a more specific way, maybe a feasible way to do that.
Councillor Heremiah, another question?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Director, for that answer. And it's less about the specific properties. So what wouldn't be helpful is just naming the specific properties, because the legislation talks about people and companies. So doing a title search is all public record. That's all a title search is. It's a public database. It's accessible for everyone. So I'd really appreciate it if it would be possible just to do some more research into if that's a feasible solution.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm happy to investigate that and come back and report.
Yep. Thank you.
Councillor Murphy? You don't have any questions? Thank you. Mr. Anawira, Councillor Bradley.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm just curious if it's possible, Mr. Riley, if that part of who the interested parties is, even if it's in a confidential section, just so that we are aware, because like we don't have access, like I used to have access as a councillor to council system, and I could easily search up certain things. I used to be able to do that. I can't do that anymore. So even if it was just something that is tucked away confidentially, even, that's just my thought bubble.
No, I think they're very valid points. Conflict of interest laws are very clear, and we all take them very seriously. So not having that information could prove sometimes a little bit challenging. Deputy Mayor?
Councillor Mapp still lets you look at the registered owner of the property. Councillors have access to that information if they want.
Okay, so we have are there any other councillors that wish to speak on this? Okay, so I'll now open, Councillor Hall.
It's not immediately apparent, but is that crossing through reserve land, this road?
It's a crossing reserve land. This is road reserve.
Yeah. Okay.
And
at the
closing
moment,
road reserve.
okay, so at the moment there's a road, we've got a makeshift road that goes right through the reserve land. So what we're seeking to do is remove that road completely and make it so that no one can go through that. Okay, yeah. All right, it's got my full support as the area councillor.
Thank you very much. Can I have a mover then? Councillor Hall, you happy to move? Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Jeremiah, all those in favour, please raise your hand. I note that that was carried unanimously. Thank you very much. You happy with that? Okay, moving on to item 6.1, it's the Bethania to Logan Village Rail Trail. I'll now refer to late report, what? I probably do. 4.2 to 6.1. It appears that my late script does not include a particular report. We're just checking that the directors, if his has that too. It does, look at that. So we'll move on to item 5.1. Who's opening that? Is that you, Mr. Maloof? Thank you very much, Mr. Maloof. Can you please open discussions? Before we open discussions, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? There being none, Mr. Maloof.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This report is just a routine report to close out the road infrastructure delivered in the last financial year and a look ahead to the current financial year. There's a presentation that goes with this. Are we able to get that up on the screen, please? Thank you. We'll just start with a wrap up of Q4 and then the whole of last financial year, just some basic statistics before we go on to the look ahead for this financial year. A couple of great projects that kicked off in the last quarter that we've been waiting a little while for. The South Street suite of projects in Jimboomba, upgraded under the local road curb and channel and drainage program, finally got underway with service relocations, and those works I think started in earnest for construction of the upgrades last month. So it's great to see that one reaching construction. Compton Road Cycleway, a very sore missing link in our city's cycle network, providing safe carriage over Slacks Creek. Finally, that was able to start in the just at the end of the last financial year. Most of that work's actually carried over into the current financial year, but it's great to see that one starting off after a lengthy gestation period. Also, Scott Lane, we finally had land and ability to undertake those works, so that kicked off before the end of the financial year, so which is quite a significant upgrade of the existing low-level culvert that was there to a much higher level and more flood-immune bridge. Work that we undertook for the EDNS branch, the Logan Lee Road Healthy Streets project. Very challenging project, or always working around highly developed existing infrastructure. Certainly provided its challenges with existing services and working in such a high volume traffic environment, but again, great that project was able to kick off and has actually now been completed too. Very interesting project that kicked off in the last quarter of last year was the upgrade of the culvert network around the Grand Plaza shopping centre. Some sections of this actually go under the structures of the shopping centre, most of it's under the car parks, but very large drainage infrastructure down there, and certainly in much need of some attention to bring those assets back up into good serviceability life. A lot of confined space entry for crews and council officers there, and a lot of time without seeing the sun for those people. But that project has been very interesting, and certainly great to have that one finally underway. Oops. Some of the additional projects that just worth mentioning that were happening in that first quarter, local road upgrade, Stockley Road at Stockley, master drainage work at Defiance Road in Woodridge. The Tees Bridge replacement in Verisdale Scrub was able to get underway as well for the construction phase. Fry Street local road upgrade in Munreben. The Moko Road Logan Reserve Round Road intersection was able to kick off, and the work at the Parkridge State High School car park. Unfortunately, my eyes don't allow me to read those slides, but just again highlighting some of the projects that were finally actually completed during that fourth quarter of last year. Homeview. Oh, thank you. Homeview Road, Beanley, Webb Road at Logan Lee, which was a challenging job for RCM, working in very low drainage grades through that area. Dickman Road, local road curb and stormwater upgrade. Schmidt Road, Eagleby, and Grand Plaza Drive pedestrian improvements around the shopping centre. They were all able to be completed. Rehabilitation works continued throughout the city on all of our rehab programs. Further 10 bus stops were upgraded for the hard stands. Footpath rehabilitation at 88 additional streets, 18 streets with curb rehabilitation, 58 streets for pavement rehabilitation, and the one location for the bridge rehabilitation in that quarter. So again, very big presence in the community. That fourth quarter really was a big upturn in our activity. So yeah, some good work put through in those 3 months. In review of the overall year, it was a year with challenges. Some of the big ticket items within the capital program certainly ran into a few problems. Some of the more noteworthy ones, Chambers Flat Road and the Scott Lane Bridge project, collectively, which are more than $30 million. Just looking at those two projects, certainly had some delays with land acquisition that pushed out, I guess, what we viewed were reasonably achievable timeframes on previous norms with land acquisitions. So that certainly affected our level of delivery throughout the year. We were also had a late start with some pavement rehabilitation, particularly the asphalt works, and delivered less than we would normally have delivered in that space, which has since been completed in a carryover into the new financial year. And outside of that, the Woodlands Drive master drainage project certainly ran into a few problems with Energex taking a change in their stance on some of their temporary support of their infrastructure while we undertake excavation works, and that pushed the commencement of that project largely to the following financial year, which again affected several $1 million of delivery. In the end, for much of the year, we're hoping to achieve around about $84 million. That was in the final budget amendment reduced down to 74. But again, a lot of the key projects that we had hoped were going to commence in that last portion of the year did end up carrying over to the new financial year, and our final delivery was a touch over $63 million. By function, I won't read out every single line item of where the money was spent, but again, all the expenditure was provided in alignment with Council's prioritised statements of intent for all the works. And with around about 2/3 of the delivery happening through the contract construction delivery, and around about 1/3 through road construction and maintenance. Looking ahead to the current financial year and what might be able to be expected, Certainly, there was a big upturn in, I guess, our delivery at the end of last financial year. I think with $63 million expended for the year, I think Q4 expenditure alone was around about $28 million. So we obviously had a lot of projects starting up and would have had more if a few things hadn't been derailed. We certainly carried that over into the first quarter of this financial year. At the end of September, we're about $25 million expended, so we've been able to maintain that level of expenditure and hoping to build on that again in the second half of the year. Obviously, some key contributors to this year's program is that we can finally get underway with the Chambers Flat upgrade between the Mount Lindesay Highway and Kingsway. Service relocations and clearing for that corridor commenced back in July, and we will be those works will be carrying through till nearly Christmas to clear the corridor of the existing services and get those services on their new alignments. In advance of the main construction works commencing, hopefully prior to Christmas, but we'll see where we can actually get enough meaningful work done prior to Christmas to be able to get that kicked off. Woodlands Drive Master Drainage Project has finally started. Obviously, we've talked about that one previously. Some very large culvert infrastructure, some very challenging construction circumstances for the contractor undertaking those works, but great to see that project is actually now proceeding and underway. Also about to get underway with the Gilmore Road upgrade in Berrinba, which will upgrade two different sections of Gilmore Road. The western section between, I can't recall, the Arshad Drive to Rod Gollage Drive is the overall section of works, but there's a section around the 3rd Avenue roundabout that has been previously completed and won't form part of the works. Obviously, much of the construction for the 5 streets in Jimboomba having their curb and channel curb and channel added to those streets is now going to be getting underway, and which is great to see with that project. Some of the other projects that will be commencing within the financial year will be a couple of key master drainage projects, Kelly and Cowper, each in the order of $10 million each, so some very significant drainage infrastructure there. Middle Road, Teviot Road intersection, we'll be doing some interim treatment to put metering on that roundabout and some additional turn lanes to provide some interim relief while we await the commencement of the Teviot Road upgrade between Greenbank Road and the Middle Road roundabout, which when that project gets underway, it will also include a new solution for that roundabout. That project is more likely to commence in earnest probably in the next financial year. That is only in detailed design now and is just commencing community engagement.
Just a moment.
What are you saying?
Nothing was said, nothing at all, nothing was said. Thank you very much. Can you please continue?
Pleasure. Also another nice project, a few intersection projects, nice to see hitting the ground. The Browns Plains Road Scrubby Creek intersection will be able to commence. That's in pre-award at the moment. Similarly, the Albert Street and Station Road is about to be awarded, so we're able to get underway with that soon, and they'll be both welcomed additions to the city's infrastructure. Chambers Flat we've discussed. Mundoolan Road, Jimboomba, up for a major pavement rehabilitation, and Leopardwood Road at Cedar Grove also in for pavement rehabilitation upgrades. So that's some of the more key projects, but as always, it's expected that across our capital projects and our pavement rehabilitation projects, our capital projects and our rehabilitation projects across all assets, we will be at 450 to 500 locations throughout the year to deliver the capital program. Based on where we currently lie with project preparation, we've taken some programming of our works to try and establish our likely position for expenditure for the year. There is an adopted baseline budget of $141 million. However, some of the projects that will contribute to that are more likely to commence in the following financial year. And that's some of our key priority development area, priority infrastructure area projects that are very high in dollar value on individual projects, but represent a small number of our outstanding projects. So some of the challenges of those projects are typically the long gestation period to get them from planning through to construction and commencement, a lot of land acquisition, negotiation and compulsory acquisitions to be conducted, and certainly working with the service authorities. So a reasonable baseline position at the start of the financial year was viewed to be around about $105.5 million, as with the risks that we're aware of at that time, a reasonable projection of what could reasonably be achieved. Probably the telling information is the amount of work that we currently do have in progress, that not just that is proceeding to construction, but in project development alone, these are projects that will be delivered within the 5 to 10 year time frame or less. $375 million currently progressing through those areas in detailed design. They're projects that we hope to construct in the next 1 to 5 years. $260 million currently progressing there. We've got $45 million in construction procurement at the moment for this year, and we've actually got $60 million of contracts and construction that has already been awarded. So certainly the numbers that we've put there should be achievable. There are still some risks to that program moving forward. Some of the ones are retained from risks that we experienced last year. Pipe supply is still very tight within the industry. We're now at over 40 weeks for supply of pipes in a lot of locations. It's not all sizes, it's not all types of pipe, and we continue to try and manage that situation, but it can be expected that that number will continue to increase, with I guess construction being the main lever for stimulus in the economy, and Southeast Queensland being very active anyway. Certainly the news of the Olympics is only going to add to those pressures over the medium to longer term, so it's something that we're really going to have to watch, but we're doing everything we can to mitigate those risks through early procurement. And using alternative products where it's appropriate to try and make sure that we can hit the ground at our earliest possible opportunity. We've worked through a lot of the issues with Energex. We can program those issues, but on the subject of service authorities in general, they are also feeling the pinch with the amount of construction activity, both in infrastructure and in development, that they are having to respond to, and we are starting to see push out in the timeframes for those service authorities, and so that will be one to watch. Obviously we can't do too much if we can't get those service authorities to respond to our requests for work. Starting to see, I guess, some difficulties within the construction labour market. Certainly, engineering is a very difficult one to place positions with at the moment, and we're trying to work through with People and Culture how we can respond to that. But we have had a number of positions that have been active or seeking to be filled for quite a while. Obviously, the second half of this year has got a notable upturn in our construction expenditure, and as yet we haven't been able to secure the engineering resources to be able to run those contracts, so we continue to try and bring those people on board. And starting to see some in the subcontract and supply market, some of the smaller precast concrete items still not a problem for us at this stage, but starting to feel some increases in lead times there. Bridge decks, depending on what sort of units are being requested, we've seen lead times of in excess of 12 months to get bridge decks, but we have been able to overcome some of those just with shopping around. And if we want to deliver our projects, there may be options to council to be able to still maintain delivery, but we are going to have to put a value on I guess the premiums that we may be willing to pay to be able to get our infrastructure constructed in a timely manner. But that is still emerging, and for the moment we're able to keep our delivery timeframes for the bridges within check. But that is coming. And probably the last one, just some of the smaller subcontracting services starting to return lead times, contractors not wanting to provide quotations to our contractors for services such as drainage, laying. So yeah, it's I guess the amount of work that is available at the moment is certainly starting to contribute to what is going to be a difficult time for us to manage our construction projects and the delivery of our capital program. That's the end of the presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Let's start with Mr. Mayor, please. No, it was his very strong arm that went like this.
Oh, yes. Through the chair, in relation to the culverts for the shopping centre, whereabouts was that? Does it go right under the shopping centre? Was that part of the original development?
Through you, Madam Chair. There's a number of different sections that we're working on. One comes across from north to south across Browns Plains Road from the shops on the northern side of Browns Plains Road. There's another section coming in from the west of the Browns Plains Shopping Centre going through. There's only a very small section that's actually appears to be under the structures that are on that site. Most of it is under the car parks. And
that won't destabilise the car park, what you're doing?
With what we're doing, no. Yeah, so the nature of those works are basically just reinstating the integrity of the culverts that are currently in place. So we're pouring additional concrete over to strengthen some sections of steel that have been corroded, and yeah, okay.
Councillor Wilcox.
Thank you. Just wondering, how long did it take for the land acquisitions to go through for Chambers Flat Road, and how many residents were affected?
Through you, Madam Chair, I believe there was somewhere in the order of 52 or 53 properties affected for frontages along the Chambers Flat alignment. I believe those land acquisitions were somewhere between 18 months and 2 years, if I recall correctly. So certainly our experiences prior to that had been in the order of perhaps 6 to 9 months for acquisitions. I think it was unfortunate that acquisition transpired across a state election, which may have impacted, but...
Oh, good. I just wanted to know how many and how long. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you, Mr. Maloof, for the presentation. I'm just curious, and please direct me, this might have to be a question in GB for the director, I'm not sure. Does the footpath program under LIP, is that under your position?
Through you, Madam Chair. From the prior financial year, the Road Infrastructure Delivery Branch transitioned the footpath programs to the RCM branch. So RCM now has carriage of both footpath capital and rehabilitation.
Thank you.
Councillor Heremiah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Earlier in the presentation regarding those culverts underneath the Grand Plaza Shopping Centre, you mentioned that there are in-house council officers that have been on site. Can you please describe the roles and responsibilities of in-house council staff and then the contractor when it comes to that project?
Through you, Madam Chair, the council staff that are attending that site regularly are our quality assurance. They perform, they're engineers who perform quality assurance roles, making sure that the contractor is completing their works in accordance with the methodologies that they've stated. They are also contract administrators, and so they are recording and making sure they need to have a detailed understanding of how the contractor is progressing the works so that they can then appropriately administer the contract. They're quite a difficult contract to administer because of the large amount of unknowns that typically happen in that style of work. They're there for record keeping and making decisions on the spot for extending particular treatments, and so there's various levels of engineering who are attending that site, but mostly it's the site engineers who've got the primary administration functions for our key contracts.
Thank you for that. And when it comes to quality assurance on that contract, is council in-house staff, are they the sole quality assurer, or do we also have an external supplier serving as a quality assurance role?
Through you, Madam Chair, the contractors that council engage, we ensure that they have a third-party accredited quality assurance scheme and that they are registered against. We also have engaged, because this is quite specialist work, that we certainly the first time that we've undertaken this style of work in a drainage network since I've been at council, and that's 18 years. So we don't necessarily have all the direct in-house skills there. So those our engineers are also being guided by a consultant who has been engaged to provide advice on the particular treatments and just to assist in the technical administration of that contract and those works.
Thank you. And on page 20 of this PowerPoint, it mentions the Chambers Flat Road upgrade between Parkridge Road and between Derby Road. And that's quite an important project, and I have a few questions around that. When it mentions that it's due for construction in 21-22, as a layman, when it comes to engineering, my picture is that we'll have the team on site, we'll have diggers, we'll be laying different sorts of road material. Is that a fair characterisation of what for construction means?
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, they're all things that you can expect to see on a construction site. That one, I think, will be kicking off quite late in the financial year, so that is still progressing through detailed design at the moment. There's been some challenges with some aspects of the design for that project. We didn't actually, in the expenditure forecast, there is very little expenditure allowed for in that project. So we're not expecting it to be well progressed within this financial year. It will mostly be in the following financial year. Yes, and my apologies, my eyes failed me in looking at the board. I skipped over that one because I thought it was the other Chambers Flat Road project. But, yeah.
That's okay. And when it says that this project is for construction in 21-22 pending final project approvals, could you please describe what a final project approval consists of, and when we're expecting that approval to take place for that specific project?
Through you, Madam Chair. Project approvals covers a very large scope. That is everything from any environmental approvals that may be required, approvals from service authorities for dealing with their infrastructure. It may involve, and if it's specifically in relation to the Chambers Flat Road project, I don't believe there's any land acquisitions associated with that project, but normally it would include a finalisation of land acquisitions, finalisation of procurement and authorisations for expenditure in line with the budgets of council.
And when are we expecting that final project approval to take place for this specific project?
At this stage, I'm sorry, through you, Madam Chair, that would be probably after Easter at this stage. Again, we're only just proceeded past preliminary design gate in the design process for that project. There were a few challenges in getting a suitable solution for that project. So, yeah, we're not expecting to be providing the design for approval to progress to construction until probably just before Easter, and then there'll be certainly during that time we'll try and bring forward the procurement for the construction works, so that that's being procured off the 90% complete design, which we can manage those not having the finalisation completely, so we can peg back some time there. But yeah, by the time a contractor then mobilises to site, I'd be surprised if we weren't just only talking about potentially June for construction on that project. We'll keep any opportunities that we've got to bring that forward. We'll obviously be doing that, but yeah, I would expect that the approvals will be in the last quarter.
I really appreciate that. And one final question about this project. With that final project approval, is there a risk that won't be obtained in this financial year, and how substantial is that risk?
At this stage, not aware of anything that would prevent the project from being approved within the financial year. As I said, we've had some difficulty with some of the design elements, but at this stage, yeah, we are still expecting that one to be approved. A lot of the risks that I spoke about earlier will still play into that project, and we need to be able to secure the supply of drainage products. We haven't commenced that. We're still too early in the design to have the final sizing of drainage elements for that project, but we will procure that as soon as we've got that schedule. To mitigate risk, Council is actually initiating the procurement of those products where we can, and we novate the contracts for supply to the successful construction contractor when that contract is awarded. So that's one way that we can peg back time, and that's been successful for us in the past. So we'll be looking to utilise all those mechanisms up our sleeve. But yeah, look, I think the delay of the project is more likely to be influenced by I guess market forces in construction at the moment, more so than any unexpecteds in the project.
Great, thank you for those answers, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks very much. Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, through the chair. Again, on page 20, the Kelly Street and Kelper Avenue drainage plan, I just want it noted that we're going through council facilities of the community hall there and the sporting precincts for the Giants. So can we make sure that we work with them and make sure that we're doing it in the off season if possible, because that goes right through their football field and they only have one football field. So that would mean a shutdown of a sporting group that has something like 383 members in a small community of Eagleby. So if we could work towards that, that would be fantastic. So thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, happy to take that on notice, and we'll certainly make sure that the team is managing that actively with those groups.
Councillor Hall.
Right, so this one's got a bit of a question and maybe a little bit of a chop. It seems like, my area of Division 6 is made up of mainly an area that's kind of always been, Logan City Council, and then the other side is an area that used to be Gold Coast Council a while ago. I'm talking about the area towards Eden's Landing. It seems like the side that was always Logan City Council seems pretty straight and narrow. Everything seems fine. And then as I get closer towards the Gold Coast, it almost seems like some professionals gone out there with an Etch-a-Sketch and designed some of the pathways, because they seem to go all over the place. And there's a couple of paths out there that not even council knows exists, but they're there. They're on private properties, and they join up to council paths. I don't know what Gold Coast was doing when they installed them, but there must have been something going on then. I'm unsure. When Logan City Council kind of took over these areas in Eden's Landing and whatnot, did we get any background towards, the existence of these paths, why this path was put here and why this path wasn't? Was there any kind of background?
Through you, Madam Chair. I didn't have a large part to play in that transfer process, but from general experiences in trying to get information, we don't have a lot to work off. So certainly as far as that level, as the basis for why decisions got made the way that they did, would be very surprised if we had that.
I'll just continue because I'm constantly trying to explain to residents the history that, so because you do get new people moving to the area and they say, why is this place all over the place? And we ask council about it and council doesn't know. And the reason is because we did inherit a lot of these areas when the areas, transitioned from Gold Coast over to Logan City. And now we're kind of playing catch up, so to speak. Because I've got a street which is Lima Street, which is a very long street, very well connected to many other streets. It doesn't have a footpath at all. It kind of connects into where a school is, Eden's Landing, primary school, which is very popular. You have a lot of kids walking along the streets, and there's no footpath at all. You've got other streets connecting onto it. You've got people in NDIS housing going, on these streets to get to bus services, but there's no footpath at all. And I have to explain to them, this is how Logan City Council got it. This is what we received from Gold Coast Council when we got it. Now I'm actually in the process of putting LIP money, which I could be spending in parks or in other things, just purely on these footpaths, just so I can get that connectability, so we can actually get these things connected up, and so we can fix these problems that we've had in this area that we've inherited from the Gold Coast. I'll just say, in terms of choosing what we put on the rehabilitation priority, would we say look at a dangerous footpath?
Sorry, Councillor Hall, just a
Wrapping it up.
suggestion. Rehabilitation means the repair of something, not the creation of it. So yours is about the creation of a footpath rather
Yes.
than the repair.
Well, this is the thing is you've got footpaths that the community recognise. They lead up to bus services and bus stops and whatnot, but there's no footpath there. So it's
Sorry,
not going to be on a
Councillor.
rehabilitation list.
It's not on a rehabilitation list because you're wanting to create a new footpath rather than adjust an existing one. The rehabilitation project is for the repair or the adjustment of an existing footpath, which is why my predecessor put $484,000 a year into footpaths.
I'm putting more than that, probably because footpaths have become a bit more expensive. But how do we judge, what goes up in the priority of what gets done?
Through you, Madam Chair. Certainly the difficulties of the different areas of the city is not lost on us. An amalgamation, we had 4 times the area of the city, come the Monday the 8th of March, Monday the 8th of April, I think it was. Still got the date firmly scarred in my mind. Double the road network. It was Gold Coast, but it was also Bow Desert Shire Council that we inherited assets from, and changed us from a largely evolved city from an infrastructure perspective, where money had been getting spent for a long period of time in those areas, which is why we've got some of the divisions that are quite different from an asset point of view, and we had areas that are obviously at a far different stage of their evolution. So those suburbs will still have to go through that evolution period the way I guess the existing Logan did, and that was, it was completed in the same way. A lot of investment divisionally year after year to get the networks that we had. So but as far as prioritisation for where do we put our money for new footpath assets, I can't speak for the RCM manager who currently looks after that, certainly.
Sorry, Mr. Malif. I think the director actually wants to add something just quickly before you continue.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Okay, no worries.
That's okay.
Your prerogative.
Certainly in regards to footpath, it is worth noting that for new footpath, the only program that exists to build new footpath is the LIP program. The LIP program was a program that was created from funding originally, and it had a previous name as well, by the combination of a couple of programs across council. One of the biggest funding sources that actually got amalgamated to create the LIP program was an annual footpath program. So there was actually an allocation in previous councils for the creation of footpath across the city, which had some prioritisation on it. There was certainly additional park funding as well. Now, certainly council at that time elected that it was more appropriate to have all of that funding allocated on a divisional basis so that there could be valued input taken from individual councillors on where that merit was. So that really did bring, I guess, a lot of opportunity back to the councillors to have some input into those programs and not to be locked to individual outcomes. So certainly the councillors at the time made a fairly strong position to say that in one area there may be a stronger requirement for footpath, whereas in another area there may be a stronger requirement for parks, and that there would be merit in that being able to fluctuate from year to year rather than there being a specific lock of funding allocated to footpath which could only be spent on footpath, or allocated to parks that could only be spent on parks. So that's why there's not, I guess, an additional funding source to be able to construct new footpath. All of the funding that was available for the new footpath is incorporated into that LIP funding, which is where that funding came from.
Councillor Hall, would you be happy if the infrastructure director provides you with a historical request for footpaths in your division under former councillor McIntosh, and who had coverage of that while she was under Councillor Smith and Mayor Parker as well?
I believe I'm already across what their intentions were from former, because obviously when we get our footpath assessments, we get that through. So if we had more LIP, we could actually get more footpaths done. Yeah, that'd be great, because I'd love to get way more footpaths fixed in Division 6. And if the only way I can do that is to get more LIP, I think that's something that probably we need to consider, because we really need to get on top of this. We've got places that we really need to connect. That's all. Thank you. You've answered my question. Great. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, it's my turn. That's awesome. I've just got a quick one, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to throw this to the director, if that's okay, Mr. Malouf. About 3 weeks ago, I received a call from a resident who, under the Defiance Road rehabilitation project, she lives in Huron Street, and at the front of her property, council contractors had undertaken work as part of that Defiance Road project. Her footpath was the same height as her fence. We had concerns around disability compliance, people in wheelchairs falling off a 3.5 foot drop of a footpath onto her fence and impaling themselves, and also with some of the way in which the pipes were placed on a very sharp corner. Director, can you respond to what's happened since those concerns were raised?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am aware of the location, and yes, it was part of our Defiance Road Master Drainage project. Certainly on that project, in the location of the corner which you have referenced, there were some services of another authority which were not indicated at that time, which we found when we were actually on site. That had an impact upon our works. We had to actually modify our drainage to be able to facilitate that. While we've effectively modified the drainage, that had some adverse outcomes in regards to the footpath in the area and the way that played, and that work has actually now been forwarded back to our detailed design office to actually rework that. So we're actually looking at the footpath through that area, the way that the land shapes actually worked, and we will come back with a revised plan in regards to how that work will be finished. So there is an outstanding requirement for us there to do some more detailed work.
Thank you. So I think it's just this particular one, unless the resident had raised it, would have pretty much gone through. And I think when it comes to those design phases, some communications with councillors and a heads up that work is being undertaken so we can actually look at it would be appreciated in the future. Does anyone have any other further questions for Mr. Malouf on item 5.1? Okay, so there's a motion on the board that the report be received. Can I have a mover? That's Councillor Bradley, a seconder, Councillor Murphy. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Mr Mayor? Thank you very much. That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr Malou. Do we have another report? We've got 6.1. So we'll move on to item 6.1. And that's the Bethania to Logan Village Rail Trail. Before we begin this item, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? Item 6.1. Councillor Bradley.
It's not a conflict of interest, but I might have to go for a meeting. Is it possible to ask a GB to the director?
We're not at GB, but I understand where you were starting from. Does any councillors have a problem with Councillor Bradley raising her GB item before she has to leave? No one has any objections? Councillor Bradley.
Thank you, through the chair. Mr. Ali, I'm not sure if this has been presented previously, and I don't recall it being, so please forgive me if I've got it wrong. We used to get a reconciliation of our footpath program and like savings that had been made from the last financial year. Now that the footpaths under LIP are gone to RCM, is it possible to get that reconciliation and savings so that we know what we can spend for this financial year?
Director.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm certainly happy to have a talk to the manager of RCM and have the discussion with him around the information that he can provide back in regards to that, yes.
No, that's not a problem. So moving on to item 6.1, Bethania to Logan Village Rail Trail. Does anyone have a conflict of interest to declare? There being none, Mr Ranawira, I open the floor for discussion.
Okay, this is, with this latest report, there was another report, the last report was submitted to the council in June. So since then, we have made some progress. That's indicated in the report itself. We received a reply from the Honourable Minister Bailey, outlined the positives of rail trails and mentioning TMR is waiting council to make an application for further consideration for implementation. We also have engaged internal branches after this last report. We engaged representatives from Water Elliott Holdings, which is the Palm Lake Resorts Management, and we informed them what we are going to do, and we received some feedback as well. We also carried out early engagement of residents of both resorts of Palm Lakes with great support of Division 4 Councillor Kransky. The concerns raised in those early engagement are included in the report and will be attended to in further project development stages. Birchill's consultant has provided the executive summary of the feasibility study, which is attached to the report as well. And they have made a statement, feasibility statement. It indicates the rail corridor is viable route. Of course, it has the potential to provide somewhat quality experience for users. Landscape along the corridor is a mix of relatively appealing urban and rural residential landscape and few scenic creek crossings as well. There is a market for this in the meantime, but the market will extend if the length would be greater. The length of the red trail is greater, that's what they're saying. So because of that, there is a potential they attract more walkers in the current form. The trailheads, Bethania and Logan Village, can be easily accessed by car, V1, train, for day trips, etc. It has a potential to attract an additional 5,000 day trippers per year. As almost 60% of the Logan's population can access the rail trail. That's about 200,000 people. As a conservative estimate, 50,000 people could visit. That's a reasonable estimate. Obviously, rail trail will create economic, social, physical, health, environmental, and cultural benefits. The consultant has given an economic benefit prediction for nearly $900,000 a year for the region. And the estimate cost is still the same. It is about 7.1 million. Consultant's final detailed report is scheduled to be delivered in mid-October. Once you finalize the report, we will make a submission to TMR and applying for to progress the project to the next stage, that's the implementation stage. But also in the report, we made another suggestion. The report, what is required in incorporation in our submission outline in the report, but we believe the project has a regional context, more of a regional context, as well as a heritage value. So because of that, we propose to request for more funding from the state. 80-20 split is suggested as a recommendation. So that's basically what the report says. I'm happy to take any question.
Thanks very much. Councillor Kerensky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate everyone's getting a little bit weary, so I'll try and keep it tight. I just wanted to make, first of all, if I may, a couple of comments. I'd like to thank the council officers for honouring our commitment to residents to bring this report back to the October round. I note that there are a lot of Palm Lake residents who are very eager to hear the outcomes of this report. I'd also just like to say a huge thank you to council officers, including Kamal, Lizelle, and officers who aren't here today, Peter Murphy, who went out for early engagement on the 1st of September and met with the hierarchy of Palm Lakes Waterford and Palm Lakes Bethania, and by that I mean the representatives of the residents who were the resident committees. And we don't typically go out to consultation at this point in time in a project, but given the significance of the potential impacts of this project on those residents, I'm very grateful for that opportunity, and the feedback was really quite valid. What I heard from residents was a resounding concern pertaining connectivity between the two resorts. As most councillors would know, these two resorts back onto one another, and residents wanted to ensure that they could actually move freely between the two resorts. I also heard that a number of the residents currently use the hard stand in the what is the rail trail itself for parking their recreational vehicles, and they would like an assurance, whilst that may not be from us, it might actually be from Palm Lake Holdings themselves, an assurance that their RVs can be parked securely on site. And of course, residents raised concerns which we anticipated regarding the security of those residents who reside there, and we had a discussion around fencing, lighting and the like. So I did just want to say a huge thank you to council officers, and also to acknowledge that the consultants from Birchells were there on site also to answer the questions directly to the residents. And I know that we still have a lot of conversations to be had, and we haven't yet engaged in a process of formal engagement, and I believe that would only occur after we have formal agreement. But I just wanted to say thank you, because we've been able to capture that information, that intel, as part of the report that I believe is coming back in October. And I think this is a very exciting project for the broader community, and I'm curious to hear what my councillor colleagues have to say.
Thanks very much, Councillor Kerensky, and it's really great that Palm Lakes Resort is going to move to secure their residents and their security as the property owners of that facility or those facilities, rather than putting the impost onto other ratepayers. I'm really pleased with that as an outcome, and I think that you know, as a business operation, which it is, they're taking due care of their residents. We have Councillor Bradley asking a question.
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. Can I just have clarification, Mr. Banawira? What we're supporting today is an 80-20 split with state and council, and we're committing future budgets to go towards this. Is that correct?
There are 5 recommendations up there. One of the recommendation is to suggest and request the minister to consider 80-20 funding. So if Minister declines that, then of course we still have 50-50 funding. That's my understanding. So we are not going to stop the project. I believe we are not going to stop the project if we don't get the 80-20. In other words, that's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
Just for a moment, Councillor Brady, Mr Director.
Through you, Madam Chair. So certainly, and when we've brought the project to committee before, we've actually highlighted the fact that within Council's capital program at the moment, this project isn't actually currently funded, but there is actually opportunity, and the state has written to Council in the past indicating that they have funding available for rail trail infrastructure across the state. They've been expressing, I understand, some degree of urgency in regards to considerations that they will make in regards to that funding, and been requesting that Council put in their submission. Certainly in terms of making an application for funding, which is typical for all the funding applications we make, there is a requirement for Council to indicate that it has committed funding equal to be able to make that application. So certainly within the report, and if you read it the way it's that I intended, it actually is conditional upon Council agreeing to its portion of the funding if TMR actually provides their portion. So there is actually an if statement that says if TMR was to provide their portion, the Council has committed to provide the portion to secure that funding. If we weren't successful with TMR, then the decision in regards to the funding would hold over to a later point for Council to make a greater decision in regards to the total funding at that time. At this stage, it would be unallocated operational surplus that would be used to, I guess, be able to secure that application to TMR.
Okay, thank you. And this subject has been quite controversial over the time that I've been a councillor. And I know that a number of residents were rather concerned about their own safety of their properties and having a lot of people cycling past. I'm just curious, with other projects, rail trails that have happened in our state, have the state government funded the whole lot, or have councils contributed?
The latest funding, through the chair, the latest funding letter that was sent to us by the Minister in 2018 indicates the state is not going to fund the full amount. They are giving 100% funding for the planning of the rail trail and 50-50 funding for construction.
Okay.
That's,
but my question was, have other areas of the state?
as far as I'm concerned, I haven't heard any other state.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question.
Councillor Raven.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just to be clear, Mr Director, the recommendation as it stands doesn't bind council to expenditure. And if we were to, at a later date, decide that the amount was too great for the budget during a future budget consideration, we would just lose the funding that the state had put forward. Is that right? So we're just doing enough to put our hat in the ring and say how much you're going to give us, show us the colour of your money, and in good faith, we'll match it. Unless it's too expensive, then we won't.
Through you, Madam Chair, I probably wouldn't interpret it that way. The funding application requires a signed declaration, presumably by the CEO, indicating that we've committed the funding. And that's why I've brought the report with the wording in it, because I'm very mindful that I don't want to ask our CEO to sign something which implies that we've, states that we've allocated the funding to the project if we haven't. The point that I was moreover making is if we made the application to TMR and TMR didn't fund the project, then council's own funding would fall away as well, so that we wouldn't be left with a project which was half funded by council, which was tying up council's funding from its operational surplus now on a project which only had half the funding, couldn't proceed, and was, I guess, sitting high and dry. So I was trying to make sure that we didn't unnecessarily allocate that funding, but certainly in making the application to the state, we would be making a commitment to say that council has the funding to fund our half or our 20% based on the application that we make for the project.
It's a pretty big commitment to make out of sequence and not in a budget process.
I am not going to argue that point, no. I understand that it is a significant commitment. I guess the real implication for council is a consideration around trying to secure that funding from TMR and the value of that to council.
I appreciate that we don't want to lose, especially an 80-20 split. That would be crazy to give up that sort of investment from the state. But in this place and other committees like it, we've balked at the idea of even out-of-sequence commitments to the tune of $100,000, let alone millions of dollars. And even an 80-20 split is in the millions of dollars. I'm very supportive of the rail trail, and I'm very supportive of getting as much contribution from other levels of government as possible, but it's very difficult to make a decision, a budget decision, out of sequence, out of context to this scale. And I was hoping we'd have an option to be able to put our hat in the ring, and because it will take them 6 to 12 months to give us a decision anyway, and have the capacity to say, actually, given the cost of now blown out, it's too expensive, we would like to withdraw it, and then the state can keep their money too. But you're saying there's no option to do that. We can't have a bob each way, basically.
I would be making the statement that says we sign a declaration that says that we have the funding allocated to be able to progress the project. Until such time as there is a binding financial agreement signed between us and TMR, there is not a binding agreement signed between us and TMR, but I must admit that in good faith, they are asking us a question, and I would like to be clear in our answer to that.
Understood. Thank you.
Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth. The rail trail will be sensational. We've already got one section allocated. Money won't be falling out of trees soon. COVID will finish. I'm thinking that we just go for this and find the money. We need to, anything that can value add to this organisation, any money that falls out of a tree should be swamped on. And I think that 80-20 is a very good ratio. I would still be interested in 50-50, but I think, you know, free money should be grabbed at any occasion as a priority.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. My question is, can we do this outside of a governance committee? Can we actually consider this? We can? Okay. There any other questions from councillors? Councillor Bradley.
Yeah, thank you. Can I ask the director to answer rather than councillors? Can this be done outside the governance committee?
Through you, Madam Chair, I have discussed with my counterpart directors the proposal that's been put forward in the recommendations. There are a couple of minor amendments which I'll talk to in a second, but they are just wording. And I was advised that we can actually progress the resolution, yes.
Thank you. And I just want to foreshadow, I'll be putting my name against this purely because the state government have never done this before, and they've always funded them before wholly.
Councillor Raven.
Sorry, Madam Chair, just point of order to clarify from Mr Ranawira, that's not the answer you gave. They have partially funded them before, they've never wholly funded them before, is that right?
As far as I'm...
I think you just misunderstood, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a motion on this, Mr Mayor. There's a minor amendment to the motion. Director, just speak to it, and then Mr Mayor will move.
In regards to the recommendations that appeared in the report, just for councillors' information, so in recommendation 3, the wording has been changed slightly to be from unallocated operational surplus. It previously had read operational surplus in future years. It's just a better description of that, and that came from discussion from some of our financial colleagues. And in the 5th dot point, there was a reference to this report being a confidential report. The word confidential has been removed because the report wasn't actually confidential. That was just a slight error.
Before you move it, Mr Mayor, can I please just have the answer? What is the actual dollar value of an 80-20 split and a 50-50 split that councillors are being asked to consider?
So, 50-50 in terms of this project. This 7.05 is the project total value, so 3.55.
And the 80-20 proposition?
1.4.
Sorry, 1.4 million? Right, so there's a motion, 1.42 million. There's a motion on the board before councillors. I'll give you a moment to read it. So item 1, item 2. Do I have a mover for the motion, please? Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor's moving it. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Hall. All those in favour, please raise your hand. So that is carried with the exception of Councillor Bradley.
I am against, thank you.
Councillor Raven.
Abstain.
Councillor Jeremiah.
Abstain.
Did I miss anybody in that? Nope. Okay, that's passed. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so that marks the end of the road infrastructure delivery manager reports. Is there any general business for the manager? Councillor Bradley, we went to general business earlier because you were leaving, then you piped in on the next one and now you've got general business? Okay, just checking. Mr Ranawira, do you have any business? Oh, Councillor Wilcox.
Mine's probably for all three. So do you want me to go down? Okay. All right. And apologies in advance, councillors. So recently I've had residents who have come to me because they're directly affected with the NIR letters that have been sent out for the Crowson Lane Road project. And they've come with quite a few concerns. So you bear with me, I'm sorry. So residents have stated that they weren't engaged in meaningful consultation. In fact, they've all been separated, never spoken together as a group or consulted as a group, and have never been given the opportunity to have meaningful consultation all together. They've been split up, never spoken to together. So one of my first questions is, when was community engagement and consultation provided for the wider community as a whole, all together, for the Crowson Lane project?
Who wants to answer that one? Mr Malouf?
Through you, Madam Chair. Certainly, as far as property owners that are affected by a notice of intention to resume, that is not a process that happens in group anywhere. We undertake those with individual conversations with the landowners because of the sensitive nature of those conversations. As far as providing consultation with the wider community, there had been initial plans to undertake a community event. Unfortunately, that was right as the COVID situation was starting to evolve, and that event had to be put back. And I believe that you were included in the discussions around and advice that we'd have to put that back. When conditions were more certain, there was a community event, which I believe was actually undertaken March this year, where we invited and we publicly advertised for people to attend a drop-in event at the community hall at Greenbank.
Right, I'll stop there. Sorry. So that was a drop-in event. It wasn't really community consultation. That was an information session. There was consultation, or there was notes taken, but not a lot of consultation. It was more to inform the community. So hang on. So the project got approved in 2018 for the SHRIP. So what was done in between 2018 and 2020 or 2021 for community consult?
Just a moment. Point of order. So whether it's a drop-in or whether it's a whole of community consultation, it's still a public consultation where multiple people can come and ask questions at the same time, so, yeah. Mr. Miller?
Through you, Madam Chair. In addition to those that drop-in event, I do emphasise just how much consultation occurred with landowners through written correspondence, face-to-face meetings, telephone calls. We have actually received feedback from the community at just thanking for the extent of engagement that has occurred. So I understand that everybody has different experiences throughout this, but we certainly have been commended in some instances for the amount of consultation we have undertaken, and we gave the same degree of consultation opportunities to everybody along the corridor.
So that was along the corridor, but you still haven't gone out to the wider community, apart from that one session that I organised. Yes, it was meant to happen last year and it happened this year, but that's the only consultation that's really happened with the wider community over the project, is it not?
That would be a normal situation for projects where we are undertaking works on the existing alignment. There was some degree of consideration for the solution of that project, which was the extension between in the Greenfields project. And again, the people who were affected by that section were directly engaged. So we would normally undertake consultation of that style where we are doing an upgrade to an existing corridor where we're not taking different alignments. We would undertake the advice of the preliminary design findings of what the design solution will be, and engaging with the community as to how the local community, the people who are directly affected, plus also taking feedback from the wider community.
So just a moment there, Mr. Malouf, you only write to the impacted residents, you don't write to the wider community. Is there a notice that goes up in the paper that people can contribute? You just mentioned that the wider community can do feedback.
We write to the local community, not just the people who are directly affected. We will write to people on side streets, and we will try and select a catchment for the people who are going to be impacted perhaps by having to travel through the construction site to get to their homes. Certainly for the community drop-in event, that is an advertised event, because we want to get feedback and consultation and discussion with the wider community, people who might just use that corridor as a commute but not live within that area. So we try to get the inputs across all fronts.
So can I please get a list and details of who that letter was sent out to and when it was sent out? Because I haven't been aware of that list being sent out. I've only been aware of direct residents.
Through you, Madam Chair, I believe that information was provided you at the time. We will happily go and hunt that out.
Thanks. So residents with the notice of, with the NIR notice that was sent out, they had until the 30th of last month. A couple of them have asked for extensions to send in their objections to it. But they're not sure what they're objecting to because they still haven't been given confirmed info on confirmed plans. They've repeatedly asked for them, they haven't got them. Some of them with their resumptions, they constantly changed. So they don't know what they're putting in objections, and it's only an objection to the notice of intention to resume. They're not technically supposed to object to the project itself. However, with the paperwork that was sent out with the notice of intention to resume, there was information regarding the project. So I said to the residents, well, if it's in there, put your objections into whatever's in this letter, not just to the notice of intention to resume, because it's in the letter. So I was a bit confused regarding that, and so were the residents.
Through you, Madam Chair, certainly with, challenging conversations such as acquiring parts of people's properties, we try to give context to that. So yes, there would have been information in relation to the project as a whole. There would have been acquisition plans provided on the intended line of acquisition. There had been discussion throughout the project that council has actually undertaken a lot of investigation to try and minimise the land acquisitions. But when we have finally been able to determine where the proposed boundaries for acquisitions to meet the needs of the NIR process have been determined, then that is what has been provided to those residents. As far as what they can object to, it is only in relation to the land being taken for that project.
Just wondering if someone can pop up when they can, just meet with me and just let me know how much is being resumed off each person, because some of them weren't able to tell me how much they were being directly affected because they still hadn't seen the plans, or they hadn't seen the most up-to-date plans.
Through the chair, the acquisition plans that would have been provided with the notice of intention to resume would normally have a square metre area on it identifying the land that would be taken. So I believe that everybody who would have been the subject of a notice of intention to resume would have been provided that information. If it's not there, it would be by error. But I would be surprised if we'd missed it, but I'm happy to look into it if there's specific information required.
Okay, I'll follow that up with residents as well. And the other thing, there was a hearing date on the letters, and I only learnt this through last week through talking with numerous residents and meeting with numerous residents out on site, that they have all been given completely different hearing days, dates, times, and things like that. I was actually hoping that they could have a hearing date on the same day so that they could actually be all there at the same time, so that they could actually all be able to support each other, because this isn't something that they wanted to go through on their own, and they feel like they've been through a process of divide and conquer. The residents feel left out, alone, isolated, so they want to have a support network there with each other, but they're not given that opportunity.
Through the chair, the hearings to lodge an objection against the acquisition of land relate specifically to individual properties. It would not be appropriate to open that up to people who are not the owners of that property. We are following all normal and due processes under the Acquisition of Land Act for the purpose of acquiring the land, but I would not foresee that that is the appropriate forum for undertaking that. We opened up council and the design solutions for the project for community feedback, and we have done that openly, and we have responded where people sought additional information. Additional information has been provided, and out of that event, and as I said, I know that there is feedback being provided against the project, but I equally need to put forward that there is support for the project from the community, and it is not a one-sided, position from the community from what we have seen.
Just a bit of a final point. So Logan City Council encouraged the residents to seek their own valuations and to seek their own legal advice and that sort of thing. But it also says that Logan City Council will pay reasonable costs. Who determines what the reasonable cost is, and how does that come about?
Through you, Madam Chair, those are, fairly standard services that can be provided by valuation experts, and certainly I believe that Council is taking industry norms for determining that, so that are reasonably qualified, and again, we'll only accept the engagement of qualified valuers.
That being said, sorry to interrupt you, that's a confidential matter between the resident who's been resumed and council. That's not for a general public discussion, I don't believe, is it?
Certainly council's position on what we will support. We acknowledge that this is it's not an easy process, and it's not a place where council really desires to be, but is an essential part of us delivering the infrastructure to keep the city supported. And we want to try and minimise the burden on the people who are affected by that, and by council providing payment for legal fees and for the support from an independent valuer. Again, this is not a valuation that is determined by council. We try and take the fairest approach that we can by allowing and paying for the subject property owners to get professional advice that we will reimburse them for, but ultimately we need to do that at normal
Point of
industry.
order, sorry, councillor
Right.
Raven.
Sorry to interrupt you, Simon. Have you raised these issues before with the staff? Good. Like, if you've raised them and they haven't been addressed appropriately, like, committee is your escalation point, but if this is the first time you're raising all of this stuff, could I suggest that you take it, because it's very divisional and very private in relation to specific residents who have contacted you, you'll probably get a better outcome in a conversation that you can have confidentially, and then if you don't get the outcome you want, you can bring it back to ordinary council as a general business.
I have spoken about it on numerous occasions, but it's also very much time is of the essence, because they had to have it in by the 30th. A couple of them have had extensions, that's it. So, and they specifically wanted to know about the hearings. They wanted it raised here, which is why I've done it, because they wanted to know, and I'm nearly done.
Okay, I was just, when it's something that's so specifically divisional, usually you'll get a faster answer. Time is of the essence by just writing to the director or manager, and you can provide the feedback. But yeah, that was my only concern, that it's not the most effective way to get a response.
So, not really a point of order, but thank you, councillor Raven.
Because it's not relevant. Like, committee is not for divisional matters. Like,
And yet every general business we manage to raise divisional matters, so, how many more questions do you have?
It's just really a point. That's it.
These have all been points.
It is really,
The last
it's
one?
whole of city, because it sits under the SHRIP program. And it's
Whole of city. Residents
It
in
was
Division
voted
2
on.
don't care about this
I
issue.
know,
let's be
it was
honest.
voted on in 2018 by the council that was sitting then, and now I'm dealing with the wrath of that decision. Yes. The residents have felt isolated throughout this whole thing, and they want to make sure that their voices are heard. And this is the only way that I can get their voices heard, because I don't seem to be able to do anything about this for them, which is why I've been bringing it up again and again and again. I'm done. I'm done.
Just a quick question on that. So residents have the capacity to do feedback on the project. Is that correct, Mr. Malouf? Just yes or no? Just.
Yes.
And has that feedback timeframe expired?
There has been ample time for when we have dealt with a lot.
What was the timeframe, Mr. Malouf, that they had? Was it 3
There's-
months, 6 months?
There has been direct engagement with residents for in excess of 12 months, I believe.
Thank you very much. So residents have had opportunities, ample opportunities to raise their concerns, have those concerns listened to. How many times did you change the plan based on residents' concerns that they raised? Can you actually reveal that, or is that inappropriate?
Through you, Madam Chair, it depends on the issues being raised. We've certainly tried to work with each individual property to try and minimise the impacts to that property. Because of the nature of the road, different things can be achieved in different locations. Some issues are being driven by drainage outcomes, some of them are being driven by embankment and earthworks outcomes. So
you've tried to listen to their concerns and actually adjust the plan around that, and not everyone likes every plan. Do you have anything else you want to add, councillor Wilcox? Thank you very much. Does anyone have any other questions or things they want to raise with the manager? No. I note that due to social distancing restrictions, not all managers or staff could attend today. That being said, does anyone have any general business for the acting director? There being none, you little ripper. That completes our agenda for today. I declare the City Infrastructure Committee meeting of 5th October 2021 concluded at, what time is it? 3:45 p.m. Well done.